Today, we're going to talk about something kind of crazy. How a single tax, a tax on paper of all things, ended up lighting a fuse across 13 colonies and put them on a direct collision course with the most powerful empire in the world. Yeah, we're diving into the story of the Stamp Act crisis.
So think about it. What does it take to turn a tax, just a simple tax, into a full-blown revolution? It's a huge question, right? It's something that's popped up all through history. And believe me, the Stamp Act crisis gives us one of the clearest and definitely one of the most explosive answers you'll ever find. Okay, so where did it all begin? Well, it started with a brand new kind of tax. And this wasn't just any tax. To the American colonists, it felt different. It wasn't just hitting them in their wallets, it was hitting them at the very core of who they believed they were.
So what was this thing exactly? The Stamp Act of 1765. Now, this was a huge deal because it was the first direct tax Britain ever slapped on the colonies. See, before this, taxes were kind of sneaky. They were mostly on imported goods, hidden in the price of things you bought. But this, oh, this was different. This was in your face. Suddenly, every single legal document, every newspaper, even a deck of playing cards, they all needed an official stamp, and you had to pay for it directly. This wasn't some tax on trade happening far away. This was a tax on your everyday life.
And right here, this is where things just explode. You had two sides looking at the same thing in completely different ways. For Britain, it was simple. We're Parliament, we can levy taxes. End of story. But for the colonists, no way. This was a massive overreach. Their whole argument was, hey, wait a second. We don't have a single person representing us in your parliament, so you can't tax us. Only our own elected assemblies can do that. You see, it was never, ever just about the money. It was about who had the right to rule.
So as all this anger is bubbling up, you start to hear these really powerful voices cut through the noise. These were the people who took all that frustration and rage and started shaping it into a real coherent argument for why they had to fight back. Let's head down to Virginia. There's this young delegate, Patrick Henry, who gets up and gives a speech that is so unbelievably fiery. It's basically treason. And his final line, if this be treason, make the most of it. Can you imagine? It was just this electrifying challenge. He was pretty much staring down the king and daring him to do something about it, all for defending colonial rights. All right, now let's jump up to Massachusetts, where you've got Samuel Adams. He looks at this whole situation and frames it in a much bigger way. He argued that fighting back against oppression wasn't just some political squabble. Nope. He said it was a fundamental natural right. And that was a game changer. It took the argument from a dry, boring legal debate and turned it into this powerful moral crusade. And then you have John Dickinson, who kind of provided the intellectual firepower for the whole movement. He put out this warning that, hey, whenever a government thinks it's above the law, liberty itself is in serious trouble. And that was the key, right? The law had to apply to everybody. That means the king, that means parliament, no exceptions. So you've got all these individual sparks of defiance, right? You've got the passion from Patrick Henry, the moral argument from Samuel Adams, the pure logic from John Dickinson, and pretty soon, all those sparks started to come together. They merged into one single, powerful flame that was about to sweep across all 13 colonies. But think about it. How do you take all of these big, complex ideas, from these intense speeches and these dense legal papers, and boil them all down into one single concept? How do you create something that everyone can grab onto, something that's easy to remember, something you can actually shout in the streets? This was it. 4 perfect words that said everything that needed to be said. No taxation without representation. I mean, it's brilliant, right? This wasn't just some catchy phrase. It was the entire argument, distilled. It was clear, it was defiant, and man, did it spread like wildfire. It became the ultimate rallying cry for this growing movement. Now here's the thing. The Stamp Act, it was eventually repealed, but the damage was done. Its impact was absolutely permanent. This whole crisis completely changed the relationship between Britain and its colonies, forever. It was clear this was about so much more than just a single tax. So what was the real legacy here? Well, the Stamp Act crisis taught the colonies one absolutely crucial lesson. They learned how to fight together. That slogan became a permanent part of who they were. Groups you've probably heard of, like the Sons of Liberty, they got stronger, they got more organized, more connected. And maybe most important of all, that idea of self-governance, it stopped being some philosophical debate. It became a hard line in the sand, a non-negotiable demand. And with that,
The path to revolution was pretty much set.
And in the end, this whole crisis leaves us with a really powerful, maybe even dangerous question that's just as relevant today. When does a law, a legitimate law, cross that line and become oppression? That's the question the colonists had to wrestle with back in 1765. And honestly, it's a question that every single generation, including ours, has to answer for itself.